All right, everybody, thank you for tuning in today. You are listening to WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And I am here today. All right, Bass, that's good. Thank you, sir. That was Sebastian Messer playing, everybody, and he was playing with us this last hour. But I am here today. If you just tuning in, you have the first hour. I was talking with Dacre Stoker, and we were talking about the upcoming Dracula Day. You know, one thing real quick, Dacre, I forgot to ask you the last hour, but I totally forgot that you have books and things like that on your website. Do you mind dropping that website real quick so that the folks can check it out real quick if they want to?
Absolutely. I have copies of all the books that I have written and been published at bramstokerestate.com, and I don't charge for signing and ship them out from here second day, priority mail. I also have the very cool Bram Stoker bobbleheads, and my latest creation is a vintage necktie, a polyester tie with vintage Dracula book covers on it. So check out the bramstokerestate.com website, go to the signature store, you'll see everything we have to offer. So there's our commercial plug for the moment.
And speaking of like cool and new stuff, Chris McAuley, Dr. Chris McAuley, you're on the line with us as well, right?
I am, Adam.
How you doing?
I'm doing good, yeah.
Good. You and Dacre have partnered up on some really interesting projects. And let me just, for everybody tuning in, let me just introduce Chris real quick. And if this is your first time listening to the show, thank you very much. Let me do an introduction for Chris and for Dacre. So Dacre Stoker is the great-grandnephew of Bram Stoker and the international best-selling co-author of Dracula the Un-Dead. And you're actually, it says on here, the official Stoker family endorsed sequel of Dracula. You also have a bunch of other books and things like that we talked about this last hour. Chris McAuley, this is Dr. Chris McAuley, is an acclaimed comic book writer, artist, and character creator for DC and Marvel. He most recently won the award for the Scottish comic The Lang Walk Home. I'm probably butchering the Irish language. I am so sorry.
The Lang Walk Home, mate. Yes, there you go, the Lang Walk Home.
In 2019, his artists were featured at the Glasgow Museum of Modern Art. So, yeah, I am really excited to have both of you on for this hour. Thank you very much for coming on. So, pretty excited about it.
Well, we're excited to be here. Of course, I'm coming just from around the corner from Savannah and Aiken, but my buddy Chris, who is an Irishman but living in Edmonton, Canada. Chris, did it snow today? I'm sorry if it did.
Oh no, I have to tell you, it's actually been really good weather for the last 2 days. So it's been nice. We've got the table set outside, and you'll never guess what's sitting on the table, Dacre.
Don't tell me it's chicken paprika robber steak. Come on.
Oh no! But the actual accompaniment to that are very own Stokerverse beer.
Oh, you've got the beer going. You've got the new beer. Oh God,
the new beer. I got it yesterday. It was delivered yesterday, so it's sitting waiting for me to taste. So there you go.
Good start. All right.
Oh, that's awesome. You know, I tell you what, I would have one with you. I actually quit drinking like 2 years ago, but that is so awesome. I mean, a Stokerverse beer, that is cool. Wow.
I'll tell you, Chris McAuley does not let too many opportunities get by without seeing if it's possible to include it in the Stokerverse. I'm sure, we just spent the last hour, Chris, talking about the Virgin's Embrace and the upcoming cholera story. I've saved a lot of the things that are, things that are really your area of expertise, which is the games and so on. So yeah, it's been a real pleasure, Adam, working with this fellow, because he brings out the best in me with all these other cool avenues to exploit and to, help people around the world, understand Bram, get into Bram, enjoy Bram in areas that I have no understanding about.
Okay, so I have to tell you, I started looking at the graphic novel, and fantastic. I have not read it all the way because we just got in touch the other day about it. But it is on my TBR, my to be read, and I am loving it. Great job. Great job.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it was an interesting process to write the script and help direct the artwork.
Oh, I'm a big comic book nerd, so yes, please indulge me. Tell me more about that because I love comic books.
Well, I have to touch on one thing. You're a Transformers fan, aren't you, Adam?
A big Transformers fan. Huge.
Okay. I worked on IDW's Transformers.
Which one?
I did. If you remember, I colored the cover and the insides for. It was a Bumblebee one.
Oh,
I should
awesome!
actually mess up what the shit was. It was a Bumblebee one, and it was Steam Train. He turns into a steam train. It was a very strange.
Oh yeah. I remember when they did that series.
You remember the one I thought?
Yeah.
I colored that one. So
oh wow.
That's just a little segue about Transformers and myself.
Matter of fact, I stopped at our local comic book store today and picked up the new Beast Wars that they've got. So yes, I'm a big Transformers fan.
Yeah.
Big comic book nerd. I love comics.
There's actually an announcement coming on World Dracula Day that you really need to listen to. There is a link to Transformers to it, and somebody that we've actually partnered up with.
Nice.
I can't tell you anymore.
Oh no worries. That's cool.
So the Virgin's Embrace. It was, it's one of those amazing stories that. It was a favorite. It's a fan favorite for a lot of people. It was translated into comics. EC Comics translated it, and that was the version that most people knew. And I wanted to go a little bit deeper into the characters. So the most obvious differences are that there's expansion with the Native American storyline, and there's expansion with Elias's storyline. So I really wanted to go deep into that. And the other aspects that I wanted to sort of highlight, it's not that the individual, I'm trying not to have any spoilers, but the individual that you would see as the antagonist, he's actually multi-layered, and it's crafting this multi-layered character.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want readers to do is I want them to read it through once, have one view, and then flick back through the pages, read it through again with a different perspective, and have a completely different view of Elias as a character and actually what's going on. And I think Elias is really the central character there. And when Dacre and I were working together on the script, Dacre came up with the great idea of having Bram and Florence injected into it. So we were able to bring a form of real life historicity to the proceedings. Bram would have been there. He did a tour through Europe. He was looking to craft backdrops, paint backdrops for the Lyceum Theatre. Elias was probably based on his encounters with Buffalo Bill. And that brought like almost a very real dimension to the script. So the process of writing the script, it happened in one night.
Wow.
And then it was sent to Dacre to approve. Dacre edited it.
Now Dacre did warn me the last hour, Chris, that you are a night owl and that you don't get very much sleep.
He's not an owl.
Well, he didn't want
to. Family secrets here.
And when you just said that you wrote that script in a night, that's pretty hard to do. Everybody, if you don't know comic books and if you don't know writing, script writing is very difficult. Comic book script writing is very difficult, and even if you're adapting a story, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It's super difficult because, like, for example, when you're writing a comic, y'all, and I'm just been dabbling, but when you're writing a comic and you're the writer, you're trying to give the artist, you're like, hey, this is what I want. There should be a backdrop of like 40 ships, attacking this planet. Go.
Yes.
And you're the artist director. You're trying to tell them what's going on, as well as like directing the story. So writing a script in one night, that's just, that is kind of a little strange, vampirically.
I have had a distinct advantage because my mentor is Pat Mills, who created 2000 AD.
Oh wow!
And he was a very exacting mentor. He still is. If Pat's listening to this, sorry mate, you really are. And I've worked with Neil Gaiman. I've had professional relationships with Grant Morrison and Alan Moore. Now, when Alan Moore writes a script, that would take more than a night because he is exacting with detail. I'm a very visual writer, so when I write a script, I see it in my mind. It's almost like a movie playing, and I'm able to project that from the panels. The success of a comic isn't just the script, but it's to do with the pairing of the literary narrative of the writing and also of the artist. It's a really collaborative project.
Mm-hmm. Let me segue that over. Let me segue that over, Chris. Since you're talking about collaborative, Dacre, we were talking the last hour about those collaborations. So could you talk about like that collaboration because Chris is talking about doing this in a night. What did you think when you first saw Chris's script?
Well, it was like, how can this guy do this so quickly? And there's got to be some errors and things. But it's like he captured the essence of it. And at that point, I really didn't know how Chris worked because this is our first project. Mm-hmm. But to see that he obviously was like full on into this, and he sort of got it. Yeah, there was a little bit we needed to just brush things up a little bit here or there, but reading a 20-page story and reducing it down to these little bubbles, I still don't know exactly how he does it. But you got to first get that story in your head, and my God, he got the main points that I thought were the important points to keep. So I was very impressed right from the get-go. I'm not just saying that because he's on the show. It's just that he seems to have it. We seem to feel the same thing.
That and this is, I'd like for both of y'all to answer this. With that, it just seems like you two have really struck it off, and it started to really synergize on these ideas with the Dracula, the Bram Stoker stories, and the Dracula things. How did that come to be? Where you're like, hey, I've got this idea, or what's some of the behind the stories? And what we'll do is we'll just make it easier. Dacre, you go first, and then Chris, if you wouldn't mind, we'll just take turns like that.
It's a difficult question, but part of it goes back to trust, and the other to me is sort of focus. And when we first got involved, it was at a comic book that Chris was doing, and he wanted some input from the Stokers. He wanted involved with the Stokers, and immediately I figured from what he was asking, he didn't want to do anything that was going to exploit Bram Stoker in the wrong way or upset the Stoker legacy or any of the living Stokers who are relatives of Bram and so on. So right off the bat, I knew that he had the right sensitivity to represent Bram well, as opposed to, and not the guys that I've worked with, but I have been approached by many people to write on things and do work on projects together, and I could just tell that their interest was more for themselves to be thrust into the Bram Stoker world and profit that way, as opposed to, I want to make sure it's done properly so that your family is happy and comfortable with this. So that just transferred over to The Virgin's Embrace when I started reading what Chris had done. It was very symbiotic that he was doing it almost looked like he didn't have to put a lot of effort into it because he was already his level of thinking was already there.
Well, with the folks that you said that you've worked with, Chris, I can see how you could have transitioned doing that in a night. That's pretty cool. What about you, Chris? How did you feel like with that? Like Dacre said, the symbiotic relationship there.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll give you a wee bit more detailed background of how Dacre and I met.
Yeah, please.
I was working for. I actually donate a lot of my time to the indie comic book scene. So I'm lucky enough at the minute I'm working on G.I. Joe, and I get reasonably well paid for mainstream comics. So what I do is I donate my time to indie comic book companies, and I work for one called 123 Go, and they asked me to come up with several stories for a Halloween anthology called 13th Moon. So I come up with this idea about, Dracula set in the future, a Weyland-Yutani style company comes, kidnaps Dracula, and starts to, use him for medical advances in human technology. That's how it started. And then I started to get into the mind of Dracula. And there's a flashback sequence where Dracula looks at his interaction with humans, starting with, the encounters of Van Helsing, and, then I sort of show a snapshot of him in the Wild West, and then projection into the Second World War, and then his kidnapping by the Weyland-Yutani company. And the core of the story really was that Dracula in his mind, he had always been accustomed to a massive level of violence in his life, but never to the indignity of being chained up and being used like this. So it was the indignity of Dracula that I was really pushing, because it's something that's never really been done before. Dracula's always been a very powerful character, and these doctors who were quite sterile in a very sterile environment using him. But of course he gets out, and then he wreaks literally bloody havoc. And I'd 6 pages to write this in. As I had finished it, I thought to myself, well, how am I really using this character? Now, my background is that I studied at Trinity University. I have a PhD in theology and in English literature. And, I have tremendous respect for other alumni of Trinity, such as Oscar Wilde and Bram Stoker. And I just reached out to the Stoker estate and was like, okay, here's the scripts. If you're not comfortable with me using this character in this way, I'll create a new character, and we'll do it that way.
Wow. And
that's whenever Dacre contacted me, and we had our first phone call, and it was straight from the first phone call. We get on very well as friends, which I think is very important in a collaborative process. And creatively, we're very much in tune with each other. And we started looking at initially, looking at Bram's short stories to turn them into graphic novel format. And I've always been a Bram Stoker aficionado.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say a Dracula aficionado. I would say I'm a Bram Stoker aficionado, because Bram Stoker's work encompasses far more than one book. And Bram's work is, he has written romance, he has written fantasy, he has written a story which really resonates with me. And you're going to correct me on this, because I always get it wrong, Dacre. Is it Primrose Path, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Primrose Path.
Yeah.
His first novel. His first novel, Primrose Path, I read as an undergraduate at Queen's University Belfast. And it was about a carpenter who was leaving Ireland to go work in the theatre in England. And his family were like, oh God, don't do that. Don't leave Ireland. And of course that resonates with me now, because I left Ireland to go to Canada. And my family had the same sort of reaction. So, oh God, you're going to Canada? Well, don't go there. They're completely different from us. But it's that insight that I love about Bram's writing. No matter what it is he's writing, there's a very powerful insight. You know, he's got a painterly eye when it comes to crafting the images and text, which is a skill in itself. But he also has a very powerful observation of the human spirit.
You know,
So that's
Chris,
why
I love that. And not to cut you off there. Dacre and I were talking about that last hour, and I think that's something all three of us have in common, that we are fascinated by the person Bram Stoker, who he was, and his legacy. And we were talking about with his writing, like in my opinion, like there's so much about the human spirit and condition. So what you were just saying, I mean, it just resonates across what we were talking about and how I feel about, you know, Bram Stoker. And, you know, and that's one of the things I love about Dacre is the historical aspects of all of the different works that you've done, Dacre, with this. And, you know, Chris, everybody listening, this is like the first time I've ever actually talked to Chris. We just got introduced last week. And so, you know, I'm learning this story just as much as y'all are. So I find this is pretty cool. So I could see the attraction of wanting to do these projects together. I mean, it's really cool that you both came together on this project. And then you have I'm just trying to get another segment in here before we do our break at 4:30. But you both have worked on, or you have these projects coming up with audio dramas. You've got the comic book, obviously the graphic novel. You've got video games. You've got some film stuff coming up. We're just going to keep following the Dacre, and then Chris, could you talk a little bit more about that and how this graphic novel turned it from a graphic novel project into these other projects?
Well, you know, Adam, they were all on the table because Chris he's like this sort of gigantic octopus. He's got feelers in lots of areas, and he's got expertise in lots of areas. So when he suggested, you know, and let's just talk about the audio dramas, Chris, when he suggested that, luckily our publisher, who Chris brought to the table, Paul Andrews of AUK Publishing in England, he said, look, this fellow would like to do, you know, audios as well. I said, well, I don't really understand what that means. You know, what are we talking about? He said, well, what we do is we write some stuff and we get some very famous people to read them. And, you know, I'm not sure exactly how popular they are here, but I know they're very popular in England. You know, different cultures are tied into different things. And when Chris started to explain to me, all right, let's start doing our classic Dracula, because we'll talk a little bit later about the different Draculas in our Stokerverse. They all stem from Bram Stoker's classic Dracula. So everything begins there. And what we're doing with the two graphic novels is, you know, going into stories that were written before Dracula, things that influenced Dracula. The audio dramas are the beginning of the ideas that these people who were in Dracula, you know, a Dr. Seward piece, a Van Helsing piece, a Mina piece, some of these different, a Renfield piece, let's play with them a little bit. You know, let's update them a little bit, just like I've done in Dracula the Un-Dead and Dracul, kind of play with that stuff. Well, Chris, you know, works his magic, and not only does, you know, he writes some really cool stuff, and then I get to approve it, I get to edit it, but he also gets some really incredible actors and actresses to read it, which is, you know, like a real coup. So I think the next thing is, you know, let Chris actually tell who, if you're allowed to, Chris. I'm not sure if what we're allowed to say, because I know on the 26th on World Dracula Day they'll become more public. But what can you share with Adam today about those audio dramas, readings?
Yeah, I think we can do full disclosure, so to speak.
Okay. I'll give you the honor. You do it.
Yeah, that was another interesting process, and I work really differently from a lot of fellow writers, so I'm a bit unorthodox. I remember waking up about midnight and going to my computer and just thinking, we should do audios.
Mm-hmm.
If we were doing an audio, what would we do an audio about? well, let's do classic Dracula. Okay. And what will we do in classic Dracula? So I started to look at each of the characters and take snapshots in time of the famous parts of the book, and look at that through the lens of the character. So our first two audios is from the perspective of Renfield. And Renfield's a fascinating character, and I don't think he's ever really been done. The justice to the character has never really been done. Mm-hmm. Dwight Fry is always my favourite cinematic Renfield. Renfield is a very sane individual. He's an intellectual. He's somebody who has experienced true horror at the hands of Dracula, and Dracula's got into the cracks within Renfield's psyche.
Yeah.
Anybody who puts themselves to that level of servitude and religious mania, there has to be something psychologically cracked there, scarred. And Dracula's the master manipulator.
I've always thought of when you make a deal with the devil, you never win. I've always thought of that.
Well, it's fascinating because you say that, and there's a link between Dracula and Mephistopheles and Faust. And Faust was actually one of the earliest fascinations I had as a child. Christopher Marlowe's interpretation of Dr. Faustus, and then Thomas Mann's interpretation of Faustus. I've always been fascinated by those. So perhaps I'm looking at that a little bit. But so I did that. We look at a form of origin story of Renfield and a continuation of that story. And we were very lucky to have Terry Malloy. So Doctor Who fans will know Terry Malloy as Davros. Hmm. So Terry was very able to do the two voices of Renfield. So the sanity, portray the sanity, and then the super sanity. That mania that I term as super sanity. And then we did two stories with focusing on Mina Harker and who Mina was and her strength. Her husband's been through this ordeal, but also her husband has given her his diary, and in the diary there's various confessions that, if most wives read, it could be devastating, but she pledges herself to the cause of destroying this evil, and then she herself encounters this evil in a very specific way. Now, Dracula, when he encounters Mina, in my view, and in the Stokerverse, it's not an erotic concept. There is domination, but it's an unwilling domination, and it's incredibly traumatic for Mina. When you're reading the book, that he basically tosses her off him, and vampires are essentially corpses. There's nothing warm about their bodies. There's nothing particularly flowing about their blood. So in that famous moment where Mina partakes of, I think Bram had intended it as an inverted communion with Dracula's flesh and blood, it's a horrendous experience for Mina, and it's one that marks her for the rest of her life. And we examine that. Now, it's wonderfully portrayed by Jessica Martin, who Doctor Who fans will know again as Mags, who was a werewolf in the Seventh Doctor's stories. And she's our artist in The Virgin's Embrace.
Awesome. I need to do the half an hour break real quick, Chris. Hold that thought.
Sure.
We'll be right back. We've got to do the station announcements and all.
Thank you for listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
This portion of WRUU Savannah Soundings programming is provided by listeners and by Brighter Day Natural Foods. Brighter Day Natural Foods has been serving Savannah's healthy food and supplement needs since 1978. It is located at the corner of Bull Street and Park Avenue. They have available online ordering and curbside delivery, and now a walk-up window for smoothies, juices, and sandwiches from the deli. They are open from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and 12 to 5:30 p.m. on Sunday. More information can be found at brighterdayfoods.com.
What does it mean when we say that WRUU is a community radio station? It doesn't just mean that we invite the community to create programming. And it doesn't just mean that we are a voice for the community. It also means that we are counting on the community to keep us going. And you are the community. Almost all of our modest budget comes from small annual or monthly donations from listeners like you. You get to enjoy our community-focused programming because many others have stepped forward to do their part. Now do your part by joining our community of listener donors. Go to WRUU.org right now and make a one-time or monthly donation. And thank you for supporting Savannah's community radio station, 107.5 FM.
Wilderness Southeast offers a variety of programs each month, including guided trips with naturalists. The organization's goal is to develop appreciation, understanding, stewardship, and enjoyment of the natural world. More information is available by calling 912-236-8115.
All right, everybody, thank you. And you are listening today to the Adam Messer Show. I'm your host, Adam Messer, here today with my special guests, Dacre Stoker and Chris McAuley. And we're talking about the new projects that they've got coming up and that they have coming out. We've been talking a lot about the new graphic novel and the audio dramas. Dacre, you were saying we were talking before. Both of you have been working on a lot of new projects, and I was wondering if you could kind of help segue those, and Chris, we could all talk about that, and what else is on the table there, Dacre?
Well, I'm glad you asked because we've got there's one more publishing thing we really got to get on the table because Chris has done a very cool job with yet another Doctor Who writer, John Peel, putting together. I've never done a graphic novel, let alone what's called a mixed media work. Mm-hmm. So one of the things you and I talked about, last time we chatted is going into Dracula and finding bits and pieces that haven't been properly exploited, and one of them is the asylum. It's Dr. Seward's asylum, and what can we do there? So Chris had this very cool idea about a book called Dracula's Bedlam, and it's got some dialogue, some textual dialogue, got some cool short stories, all linked in together, as well as some graphic stuff. So Chris, why don't you tell them who John Peel is? Tell a little bit about our work on Dracula's Bedlam that should be out soon, and then we got to leave time for the video games because that's really your area of expertise. So we've got to get some of that news out. Yeah,
I'm a huge Doctor Who fan, by the way. I grew up watching it, and I love the new Doctor Who stuff. Great. So yeah, I'm interested in hearing more about it.
I'll jump in quickly. So John Peel was the guy who wrote a lot of Dalek stories. Terry Nation, who created the Daleks, gave John his blessing to write these a lot of these Dalek stories. John's one of the he's a venerable writer of not just Doctor Who but Star Trek, Stargate. He's a sci-fi writer, and he's done so much more than that. He's written about 200 novels, I think we're looking at, over various franchises, including James Bond. So John and I have been friends now for a couple of years, and he always wanted to write a Dracula novel. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity. And Bedlam is a series of short stories within the Stokerverse with various characters, but it all interlinks with Bram's original novel. So we could maybe term it as tales from the original Dracula novel. It's not a sequel or a prequel as such, but it's
a continuation.
It's a separate entity, yeah. I think it fills in some of the gaps of the novel, but it's very much its own entity. And there's plans for a sequel to the novel as well. Now, what makes it really interesting is we have a young artist called Frederick Roseman, and we have several of the stories are in graphic novel format. So we tell the origin story of the vampire in graphic novel format, and we tell Renfield's origin story in graphic novel format as well. So it's a truly mixed media platform. So that's due out, I think, in the next 6 to 8 weeks. I got confirmation from our publisher about that.
Nice.
And yeah, so that's one of the projects.
Let me just break in, Chris, for a minute. Adam,
Sure,
imagine this. Imagine this. When you ask, is it a continuation, a sequel? And Chris said, no, it fills in the blanks. There's so many things that had to be edited out of Dracula because of length. So many areas in Dracula that Bram just, like the Demeter. So many people have speculated on what's going on with the Demeter because Bram uses just a few, like a chapter or less on it. Same thing as Chris and I discussed. There's so many cool things that could be going on in this asylum. We only learn a little bit. Like we only learn about one patient. But what else is going on? Who runs the asylum? Yeah. What's some of the drama? So those are the gaps that Chris and I have been sort of finding, exploiting, and doing fun things with. So sorry, Chris, continue.
No, absolutely, mate. Actually, I want to go back to the audio because Dacre and I created a completely new character that's part of a prequel story and a duration story within Dracula. And we crafted that for Babylon 5's Claudia Christian. She's actually a Victorian thief. So you find out why Dracula purchased Carfax Abbey within the audio. But, sorry, that's a segue back to...
Oh, no, that's great. Yeah, so, I think that's so cool because that is hard to do, to introduce an original character into any kind of franchise or intellectual property, especially one that is a fit for that universe.
That's a great strength of the collaboration that I have with Dacre, because I'll come up with an idea and then Dacre will ground it in what Bram actually would have done. It's a fascinating process because Dacre has that particular insight, which is very powerful. But going on to actually Doctor Who very quickly, Dacre and I have written a series of 3 stories for an upcoming Doctor Who annual. Featuring Colin Baker. We've written a Dracula story where Dracula and the Master team up, Dracula and the Cybermen team up, and Dracula and the Daleks team up. So that's awesome. That's coming out next month, and I can confirm that Dacre and I are writing a series of stories for the 8th Doctor, Paul McGann's Doctor, in another upcoming annual. So that's a little bit of a Doctor.
Now, are those the UK annuals? Are those the UK annuals, or are those? When you're talking about an annual, are you talking about like a comic book, or are you talking about?
They're text annuals with some images.
It's like it's kind of because I just read talking about Transformers. I just read the entire Transformers UK series, and they had their annuals for UK series versus the annuals here. Like when I think of a comic book annual here, it's like, just a like 100-page book or whatever, a comic book. But the annuals at the UK that they had were like stories. They had like, little articles and things like that. It was like, it's like a book with graphic design and all that. And
yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the format.
Oh yeah. Format. See we need that here. I don't know why we don't have that here. Those are like so cool because you got a mixture of like, all the different like things that the fans love,
Yes. Well, that's the part of the Stokerverse. We're very lucky because we've got into various franchises, including Warhammer. But I can't really talk about that at the moment.
Well, speaking of games, that's a great segue there, Chris. Let's jump into the video game side of things. So y'all are working on video games now?
Yes. And if you want to find out more about that, you have to tune in to our Facebook page.
Okay.
We will be doing a reveal on that on World Dracula Day.
Okay.
But yes, we have a few games in progress. We have a miniature game in progress, a miniature war game in progress, a series of RPG books like Vampire the Masquerade in progress, and some video games, and a really cool game that we can talk about on World Dracula Day.
I hate that we can't say it now, but we all pledged
that
we would wait till May 26th. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
okay, so let me ask you, because
tonight.
I don't want any spoilers. I'm not one of those people. I hate spoilers. Okay, but can we say, like, because I've seen the quality of the graphic design on the graphic novel, and this overall the quality of the work that you're talking about. I'm really fascinated. I'm actually going to be adding this stuff to my to be read stuff. When you're, and I know Dacre is very adamant about who he works with, and Chris, you seem like the same way. What is the driving force? Because this, in my opinion, I want to piggyback back to what you were saying earlier, Dacre, about there are some people who just want to get that blessing so that they can ride the Dracula pony out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What is this franchise push for all of these different areas that are what the fans want? They want legit, because there's a lot of stuff that people put out there like, oh, really? You did this to the character? What is the driving force behind all of this franchise stuff now? I think it's so cool. I mean, it seems like all of these different things that the fans want, you're hitting on all these cylinders, and I want to I know you could talk about that. No spoilers, but we could talk about that, right?
What we can talk about is this. We realize there are a lot of fans out there, and so far, really, there has been some comic books, obviously, with Dracula in it, and there's been plenty of, romance, paranormal romance, horror stuff. But that's all been in sort of the written word and some of the artistic world.
Yeah.
And yes, there has been some success with vampires and Dracula represented in games, but nothing like the classic Dracula that Bram Stoker created. Nothing like the actual, revenant from the grave, gnarly Dracula. It's all been framed upon and modeled after
romanticized
the stage that exactly the Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee, Gary Oldman, Luke Evans, the handsome, suave Eastern European aristocrat. Chris and I are bringing people back to the basics and back to this horrifying Dracula that is not doesn't have much of a romantic bone in his body.
Even Chris, when you were talking about the Mina making love with Dracula and the necrosis, I mean, it's a corpse. That's
if we put it in the context of it, when Dracula cuts open his chest, and I'm not sure how far I can go with this, but when Dracula cuts open his chest,
we can't be super graphic, but we can be descriptive.
Yeah, the blood is congealing. And it's a dead body.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, this is not an act of willful eroticism, but an act of domination, and that's what Dracula is. Dracula's playing a game. It's an insidious design, and he's a spider in a web. He's doing this to thumb his nose at Harker, at Jonathan Harker. He tackles Lucy because he knows Lucy is loved by Seward, and Seward has a relationship with his arch enemy or nemesis, Van Helsing. Van Helsing, in his hubris, promises that he will protect Lucy. Dracula knows that he can't possibly do that. It's a game. It's a chess game. It's a mental chess game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's who Dracula is. Dracula's a chess master, but he's hideous.
Yeah, he's a monster. He's truly a monster.
Yeah. And what Dacre and I are doing, we're bringing the boogeyman back into the bedroom.
I like that. See, I love that. The vampire. I have a little series that I wrote, and I like the traditional the real monster is the person type thing in these horror stories, right? And Dracula embodies so many characteristics of humanity and corruption that, you know, you could imagine, you know, like if Genghis Khan were alive today and he were a vampire, if he was a vampire or whatever, you know, the torture and the different things that, you know, he did, or, you know, these other evil, you know, people throughout history, you know, the different things that they've done, you know, embodied in one monster who is like, you know, able to do all these things because he's got this mental prowess and he's got these supernatural powers, you know, but it's a monster. Like, to me, it's like, you know, no, there's nothing wrong with the romance side of things. I mean, romance sells more than any other genre out there. I'm not knocking that. But I like you said, the boogeyman. I like that, you know, classic little, hey kids, don't go out at night because, you know, you're going to get snatched up in the woods, you know, kind of thing. It's like, ooh, what, you know, like the old fairy tales, you know, the Grimm's Brothers fairy tales and all that. I find that kind of stuff fascinating because it's like the real monsters are the people, you know, but then when you write about monsters who have all these human characteristics, you're like, oh, that's terrible. Yeah, that's horrible.
Well, I always liken it to Julius Caesar, for example. Julius Caesar was always seen as somebody who was a hero of the people. You know, he did create the Roman Republic, really, as we understand it. But Julius Caesar was also a tyrant. You know, he named himself dictator for life. And when his soldiers rebelled against him, he decimated them, which was the first time that I think a Roman general had done that in about 100 or 200 years. And what they did was that they basically took one of 10 men and brutally murdered them in front of the entire troop.
Yep,
So
randomly, right? Yeah. I love the story about when he was captured as a young... Random. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And then you have the you know, it was a black stone. It was a black ball that was passed towards one of you know, the 10. And you look at all of Caesar's accomplishments, but you see that darkness as well.
Well, you know, I love that story, talking about that. I love the story when he was kidnapped by a bunch of pirates and he befriended them and joked around, I'm going to come back and crucify you, or I'm going to come back and kill you. And they're like, oh, yeah. And then he did, you know, it's just amazing.
Oh, Dracula is a distillation of all of that.
Yeah.
And that's where I always have had a problem with the Hollywood Dracula. The intellect is always missing.
Right.
And the intellect is always the threat. The dark intellect is always the threat.
Right.
And that's what Dracula is. And, you know, that's why I named actually one of the audios his insidious design.
I've always thought of Dracula as being a sociopath, not a psychopath. Like, he knows the difference, but he chooses evil. There's narcissistic elements there.
Yeah. And I think, megalomania, all sorts of dark tendencies, but wrapped up within this very strange, charismatic figure. Physically, he's grotesque, but there is a charisma there. And you know, if you look at dictators throughout history, like Pol Pot, for example, Pol Pot's not the most attractive individual. You know, Hitler was not the most attractive physical individual, but there was a real dark charisma there, and that's the horror of Dracula. Renfield is almost the cipher for that, because we see in Renfield somebody who is a successful intellectual solicitor who was manipulated and used by Dracula. And there's almost a religious aspect to it. There's that religious fervor.
Yeah, people have a natural tendency to want to follow, and you know, especially when someone has, you know, that's affirmative, like, hey, this is where we're going. We have just a few minutes left of the show. Where is like the best place that people can find information about the Stokerverse and these different projects? Like you said that you're going to have a major announcement, right, Dacre, on Dracula Day?
Yes. Yeah, like, first of all, our website, Stokerverse.com, is almost finished. I think it is live. Isn't it live, Chris, right now? But it's still under construction.
It's live, yeah. It's live.
So there's.
I like the
info
website,
there.
by the way. I'm on it right now.
Go to our Facebook page. Stoker McAuley has a state Facebook page, and information there. You will find out about the announcements that we have. I think we're going to have 3 separate sort of podcasts or videos with some live discussion with some of the people we're involved in who are creating some of these games and some of these projects. So we're trying to make May 26th sort of a day-long event where each segment will have Chris or Dacre reading some of one of our favorite stories that we're bringing to light, which is Dracula's Guest. We've got interviews with some of the different folks that are involved in doing our reading. We've got Jessica Martin, our artist, who is also being interviewed. Andy Brown in Ireland is going to be sort of the MC. He's a great public relations guy. He's going to be talking to different people, and that's where we're going to be spilling the beans on some of the newest and coolest projects. Chris, what have I missed there?
No, that's it. Yeah, we've got so much. We're actually just looking at the videos very quickly. As mentioned before, we have our own beer range coming out in Alberta, Canada.
You're going to be at the brewery, aren't you, Chris, that day?
Yeah, I'm going to be in the brewery, and I'm going to be at one of the restaurants that's going to be serving a special Dracula meal, along with a comic book and a sample audio.
Nice.
And the beer. So I'm going to be there. The chef who's serving the meal, she won Canadian Master Chef. So I'll be spending some time with her.
Awesome.
And chatting to her about her preparation for the meal and her love for Dracula.
That is awesome. I can't wait till everybody who's listening, they didn't tell me the news either, so I get to see and hear it when y'all do. I cannot wait until this announcement comes up on Dracula Day. I'm looking forward to it. I think all the stuff that you are working on is just wonderful and exciting. I mean, it's really exciting because I like the true to Bram Stoker's version of Dracula. And I love that you both are carrying on that legacy and trying to be true to the character and true to, like Bram Stoker's vision of his, not just Dracula, but the other characters as well. The whole little biosphere, whatever. Yeah. So, all right. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in today. If you are just now listening, you can tune in the Adam Messer Show on your favorite podcast, and make sure go check out, if you want to get more information, make sure you go check out the Stokerverse.com and get hooked into their Facebook stuff, because that's where they're going to be doing the announcement on Dracula Day, which is May 26th. So thanks a lot.